All right, welcome to episode 5 of the Start With One series. And in this series, you're going to learn how to do web development from the very beginning. So if you've missed any episodes, you can go back to start at the number 1 episode and sort of work your way through if you're finding this for the first time. And the playlist is on YouTube, so you can look it up. Start With One is the name of the series, and you can find it on my YouTube channel. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about how to place an image into our HTML. So you can see here that this is what we've done so far. So we've added heading 1, which is the largest typography heading that we can use in the HTML, and we've also added a few paragraphs through our paragraph tag here, and then we've also added some links. So you can see there's a link here to Google, and then there's another link that wraps this entire paragraph. So that's the opening and the closing tags. And then down here we have some list items. So there's an unordered list first with the bullets, and then there's an ordered list, which is represented by this OL, and that is like a number 1, number 2, number 3 sort of list. So that's what we've done so far, and that's what we've covered in the first few videos, as well as how to set up the HTML document. I'm just using a basic Notepad, which is just a super basic text editing program for PC. You might have a very basic one for the Mac as well if you're on a Mac. But this is how I learned. It doesn't require anything special. You just need a way to write this text and a way to save it as index.html, which is what we have here. You can see that we've just saved this file as index.html. It's right here. And then when I open that document, even though I'm not online, when I open that document, it actually shows in the browser because it's reading this code, and we're telling it that this is an HTML document that you need to parse and output to the page. So that's basically how it works, and we're going to be working offline for a bit while we sort of get the beginnings and the basics of HTML. And then once we have that down and we start to actually put a page together, we can still put the page together locally, so not online, but then once we want to be able to share it so that everybody else can access it, we'll have to put it online on a web server somewhere, even if we're using something free like GitHub. So in this video, we're going to cover how to place an image into our document. Now, images are really important, and they're really important to work with too. So learning how to put images into your document is going to make your document be able to say things without actually having to put text on the page. But there are some things that we do need to learn about images. And so I'm not going to cover how to resize images or make them smaller for the web. That's something for another day for optimization and making sure that your website loads quickly. Because this website is local right now, it's not a big deal. We're just going to sort of go through the mechanics of how to put the image on the page. So I'm going to put it right here after our first paragraph and before the second paragraph. So I'll just tab over. And just to keep everything in line here, remember everything here is inside this body, right? All these things are inside the body, and so they're going to display on the page. There's nothing special that we need to put into the head tag in order to make images work. They just work right out of the box. And the image tag is a little bit different than the other tags we've been working with. So normally the other tags, let's say we wanted to put another paragraph, then we would need an opening and a closing tag. But with an image, we only need the image tag, and the image tag is img. And so our image tag has some attributes. Remember, we talked about the attributes here, where there's an attribute of this a tag, and that's the href source where we want the link to go, basically. We need to do a similar thing with our image. And let's just put that in there. It's called src, and then we're going to say the source is equal to something. and then we need some sort of file path that we can put in there, because basically what it's saying is when you read this document and you get here, you need to look in this spot, go get the image, and then output it to the page. So that's what our image source is doing, is telling the document where to look, because you can't actually put an image into the document itself. So it has to go out and look for the image. Now we can keep that image locally in a folder, so that's what we're going to do for this project, but you can also, I'll show you how to do it, where you can get an image from any place online and also be able to output that image. So the first thing we need is a source, so we need a file path. Now I've got a profile photo here that I just downloaded, and then I made sure that the size is kind of small. It's about 800 pixels tall, and we'll control the sizing in the HTML, but we can also control it using CSS, but that's later on. What typically happens in a web project is that you have at the root, this is called the root of the folder, so this is you're not any levels deep. This is the very beginning, so my folder is called About Me, and this holds all of our files here, and at the root is where you'll put your index file. So whenever you go to a website, whatever.com, once it gets to where that URL address is pointing to the folder on the server, it looks inside that folder first for an index.html, and so that's what it's looking for. So we always put the index in the root of the folder so that we're able to allow the browser to easily find the home page. Now all the other files, there's just different ways to structure your website. Our website doesn't look like much right now. It's 2 files, 1 image and 1 HTML file. But as it grows and as you get more assets to put into it, things like CSS files or JavaScript files or more images or videos, there are lots of things that you can add to your website. So as you get more assets to put into the website and load into your website, you sort of need to work on how you structure everything so that you can easily find where things are, because once you have a big long list of files and they're all different types, you can use the type to be able to separate them and see which one is which, but you're not going to want to do that every time, trust me. So we set up a file structure system, and this is the one that I typically use, and most people I think use. So we get a new folder, and that new folder we're going to call assets. It's okay to use all lowercase. A long time ago we used to write HTML all uppercase, which was sort of a pain in the neck because you couldn't write it very fast, but now it's convention to use lowercase because it's not case sensitive. So typically the files are lowercase, typically the HTML, the CSS, everything is in lowercase, so it makes it a lot faster to type. So when we have our assets folder, we enter that, and then inside here we're going to have all kinds of things later on. We'll have a CSS file, a JavaScript file, we'll have all of our images or videos. So the way we separate those out, also I often use downloads. So like if there's a PDF that you want people to link to and be able to see, often I'll put it in a downloads folder. So lots of different types of assets that you can use for your website. And so I'm just going to create another folder, which this feels like overkill right now, but you'll understand toward the end of the project. And you can either call it IMG, which is normally what I use, or some people actually say images. I'm just going to use IMG. And then we enter that, and this is where we want our picture to go. So I'm going to come here and I'm just going to grab my picture and I'm going to cut it. So I want to move it, but I don't want it to stay in the same place. So I'm going to navigate into my images folder and then paste my profile photo. So now it's inside my normal root folder, or the root of my folder, and then assets and image. Okay, so now it's cleaned up. It's clear where our assets are and it's clear where our HTML files are. So this is all that we need right now. Let's go back to our text editor. And so in order to get to that file, we need to tell this this document. So this document is in the root. And the way that we access folders, if you're familiar with this at all, is we use this sort of structure here. So we say assets and then image, but there's a particular way to do that in programming. And the way that you do that is you say, so we're already in the root because this document is already in the root. So you don't have to go up a level or anything like that. You just say assets / img, and then we need the actual document name, which is profile photo or .jpg. Now there's different types of files that you can use. So this is a JPEG. JPEGs are great for photographs especially, or for images that have a lot of variation. Maybe they have some gradients and things like that. It's based on bitmap. So there's a bunch of little boxes that make up all the different colors in the image, and it's really great at handling scaling down those images so that they're smaller, and you can make them smaller but they still look good. So it's really good for photographs especially, or for anything that has not solid blocks of color but lots of different types of colors or variations in the image. You can also use a GIF. A GIF is great if you had solid blocks of colors. Cartoon illustrations, things like that are great as GIFs. And also PNG. PNG is good if you have if you need something with the transparency. So all images are they're just a block, and then just some form of a square, a rectangle, a square, something like that. But if your image is in the center and you have sort of a cutout, or you have a transparent part of the image around it, you want to use a PNG because it has what we call an alpha channel, which is a transparency channel. So if you're familiar with Photoshop or Illustrator and how alpha channels work in those image editing programs, a PNG is what you want to save if you're using that, because it allows that transparency to happen so that you can sort of put it your image over top of another color or over a texture, and it'll allow that texture to show through. If you do a JPEG, it'll just be white space where you wanted to have transparency. So thinking about what type of image you have is really important, and you have to call the right type of image. So if you're putting this in here and your image isn't showing, you need to check the source first. Is it pointing to the right place? Is it pointing to the right kind of file? Am I calling the right kind of extension for the file? Okay, and so this should be all that we need. Let's just go ahead and Control S and save, and we'll pull up both things together here, and when we refresh, we have our image. So you can see that it's going to our assets folder, and then into the assets, into the image folder, and then inside the image folder it's pulling our profile photo and it's putting it here. Now it's putting it exactly the size that we wanted it to be, which is 800 pixels tall. And you can see that it is the size that it is, and it's however wide it is. Okay, so when you get to a small size, like this would be the size of a largish medium-sized cell phone, you can see that it's pushing sort of out of the viewport window. But when you pull it out like this, you can see that this is just the full size of the image. The image is not responsive, so it's not being changed for mobile or anything like that. So we're just focusing on getting the image to the page right now. So this is exactly what we want. And then we have a couple more attributes that are really important. One, we can control the width and the height of the image. So the way that we do that is we can say width equals, and then we can also say height equals, and we can put one or both in there. So if we put the height to be 400 pixels, this means 400 pixels, even though we don't actually put the px at the end. So we'll just be writing 400 as a value. So if I save that and look again, you can see that now it's only half as tall as it was before, because we've actually changed the height here and we've set it here. Even though the image itself is 800 pixels, we're controlling the size of the image in in our image call here. We can actually control the width, and this is going to look really funny because that's not the proportion, but you can see that we can actually manipulate the width of the image as well. Now you want to try to keep these in proportion as much as possible. If you change one but you don't change the other, so like if we took our width away, save it again, then we're going to get the original proportions. So it's only going to do a height of 400, but it's going to recalculate the width to be the original proportion. So I think the proportion is like 1.5 to 1 or something like that. The original image is 800 pixels, probably by 600 or so, and so we're keeping those original proportions. We're just changing the height. Same thing if you wanted to change the width. Then when we would get in here and we would say a width of 400, and now the width is 400, but it reproportions the height of the image. So the image is a little bit smaller than it would normally be. If we just take that off, you can see that it's a little bit wider, right? This is the original size of the image. So this is how we deal with image width. Let's just keep that to the height, and we'll keep that height to 400, and it'll resize it for us. So we have a nice profile picture. And then the last one that we're going to talk about as far as attributes in the image tag is going to be the alt. So alt equals something. Now alt stands for alternate text. And what this does is, if this image cannot be shown, or if someone is using, say, a screen reader, or they have images turned off where images, they're browsing the internet but they don't have images loading, then the alt text is going to show. If for some reason this does not, it points to a bad URL, then the alt text will show. You'll get a little, let me show you. See if I can create an error. Yeah. Chrome's not going to let me create an error. But normally there would be a little small broken image icon, and that shows you that there's an error with getting this source somehow. It's not getting the photo. It can't find it, and when it can't find it or show it, then it'll probably show an outline of 400 pixels tall, and then it'll also have this alt text. And so this alt text is really important for in a text-based way describing what the photo is. Now this alt text is way more important than just screen readers, although that's a really important part of it. But for search engines are not visual entities. So what a search engine does is it crawls through all of your code, and it looks at all the text that it can get, and it gathers it. Now it's gonna get this text, but it's not actually gonna see the image like we see the image. So the alt text is going to be the only way for it to know what this image is. If there's no alt text, then it's going to be really difficult for it to know what the image is. So we want to also make sure that we're describing the image as it relates to the page. So I mean, we could put something just so we can just say profile photo of John Doe in black and white. So this is a pretty good description of what this image is. So it's a profile photo of the person, and it's a black and white image. When you are thinking about how to name your alt text, think of it as it's going to be read out loud from a screen reader as image of. So I sort of mentally say in my mind, what is that going to sound like here? So I wouldn't say image of like this, because it's going to read image of. So sort of put that out of your mind that you have to write image of. Just put whatever it is, but mentally say image of whatever it is. And so now we have our profile photo, and I'll go cover one other one very quickly, and that is a title. So a title, whenever the person hovers over the image, it'll actually show the title. And so if we do the same thing, let's just use the name, and we save, and then we come back. Then when I hover over it, you can see that it shows the title. This can sometimes be helpful to give context to people whenever they're hovering over something, to let them know either it's going somewhere, or like if it's a painting, what is the name of the painting. There are other ways to add captions and things like that, but for right now, this is sort of a simple way to just sort of give someone a contextual clue as to what this is, who this is, where this is, that type of thing. So these are sort of the common image components, the attributes that you can put into an image. You don't have to use the height, because your image already has an explicit height because it's created at some size. So if you don't put anything, it's just going to show at that size. These other alt text, title text is probably optional. It might help you with SEO as well. But the alt text should not be an option unless the image has nothing to do with anything. It's just sort of a decorative image, and it doesn't do anything to say this is a pattern of paisley wallpaper, unless that's important to whatever the text is around it. So something to remember, and we'll cover more about images in later episodes, because once we get into CSS, we'll have to deal a lot with changing or manipulating images. And once we get into sort of the performance side, how fast your website loads and that kind of thing, then we'll start loading in multiple sizes of images depending on what size of device the person is looking at. But that's definitely for a later future. They're always later, right, in the future. That's for a later episode. So in this episode, we've covered image source, we've covered image height and width, and we've covered the image alt text and the image title. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. If you've missed other episodes and you want to start from the very beginning of the series, click the link down in the description. I'll put a link to the playlist, and you can sort of work your way through the playlist. I hope this is valuable to you. If you have any suggestions, please put them in the comments section. If you like this, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be releasing these pretty regularly, and I'm anticipating a really long series, because I'm covering HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then also how to actually get the website online. And the end goal is to have a profile that you can use online for yourself without having to use a profile on Facebook or through Google products or some other way, where you don't have control necessarily of how it's presented, where it goes, what it's connected to, where that information or that data goes. So this is a way for you to control those things for yourself. So hopefully this is really a good series for you. If you would share it with other people, that would be great. If you know someone else who really wants to be able to learn how to make a website, maybe it's a young person, maybe it's an old person, but someone who just wants to learn the ins and outs of what it takes to actually make a website, and not go through some content editing system like WordPress or something, but actually write the code, then I think this would be a great series for them. All right, I think that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.